performance session at a literary festival like this. I had performed a few poems rather, at the last year's AKLF, but that was with a few other people, and it was a part of a panel called Young Poets of Kolkata. But this time I'm really glad I get to do this, and I get to face a lot of writers in the house with us. So, pre-introduction, I developed a really bad cold in the past 3 days, and I was terrified because I didn't know how I would do this. But then, of course, forgive me because my words might sound like words. I was famine. It has survived. What else? It has survived. Different ways the world has changed. So, of course, I can survive a small cold, right? So thank you for being here. My session is called Poetry Celebrates Diversity. What we're going to do is I'm going to be talking about certain things, poetry. I'm going to talk about my opinions about things, and we have around 10 people who signed up to read their work also. So after they read their poems, we get to discuss what they wrote about, the issues that they want to discuss. So it will be a completely interactive session where I hope everybody can take something home. It will be rewarding for everybody here. I hope that it is. So before we formally begin, a little bit about me. Like she said, my first book of poetry was called A Tenant of the World. It was launched in 2017, and I wrote about, it is a collection of poetry, and my second book is also going to be a collection of poetry, and my main inspiration is travel. Now, apparently, the book is about travel, but it is a symbol for a lot of other things, and that is what I believe poetry to be. Somebody writes about a very apparent issue, but it also accumulates into something much deeper. So I write about travel, but through my stories about travel, I want to discuss cultural harmony, different stories that are not often told about certain people, stories that we overlook, and there is, and I write extensively about India, because of course India and India's values, India's opinions about politics, so social structures and gender structures, everything is all a very relevant topic of discussion today. But I also want to write about the country as seen from train windows, as seen from while traveling over a plane, as seen when you're trekking up a mountain. And I remember this very beautiful quote by Ruskin Bond, which I think says what I want to say about my work. That is, the India that I love seldom makes into the headlines. So that is what I feel, and of course I'm not saying that we shouldn't follow what's happening in the headlines, in that everything is good about our country. I'm not saying that, but there is a lot to traverse in our country. And so in my upcoming book, I've used other people's stories. Like I have written about this girl I've seen at a church in Missouri, and so she was a really small girl in a school uniform, and I wanted to, and that I am writing about her, but it actually introduces a dialogue about how she's going on to a life that will be very confusing for her, because I'm in my 20s now, the very tumultuous time of my life, and that is true for everyone, I guess, because you are dropped into this ocean of an entire life, and it's different. So, and then I wrote about women whose stories are overlooked all around India, and then I wrote about various things, and I wanted to, and then the metaphor that travel is that when you notice rail tracks, it traverses different countries, and it is impartial to country borders. And you might see a mountain range growing from India to Pakistan without remembering the huge political scenario that came in 1947. I remember this one person that I met in Ladakh. He was one of the officials of the hotel we were living in, Nubra Valley. He told us the story about the stream that was flowing through our hotel, and it flowed into Pakistan. And it felt like that stream had amnesia, and that is the kind of amnesia that a lot of people don't talk about, that it is impartial to country borders, and it can feed anybody in between the various political demarcations. So that is what I want to write about. And I also, apart from writing poetry, I also write for the Telegraph. I'm a contributing columnist. I have been, it started last year. I've been writing, because I'm a student of computer science, so I've been writing about science, technology, and various, the concept of sciences. Like recently I wrote an article about interdisciplinary studies, where I wanted to highlight the fact that there is a divide made between two forms of study, like the arts and the sciences. There's a huge divide made which gives rise to various very sociological, psychological factors. Like sometimes because of this, the way that the subjects are divided into discrete levels, people even say things like, you're a man, why are you studying humanities? Go and study commerce. That is a more manly thing to do. And this encouraged a dialogue with my school teachers where we talked about this issue that because subjects are compartmentalized so severely, we don't allow people to see the common ground that they share. And creation, I believe that creation comes from a common source, and when it finally is a product, it either gets classified into a scientific creation or an artistic creation, but the source of inspiration is still the same. That is what I feel. And I also write children's fiction for the Telegraph, and I have been serving as a mentor, a creative writing mentor for this startup called the Climber by Captain program. It's located in Bangalore, and I'm so glad I get to have a few mentees of mine in the city who are attending this today. So thanks for coming. So why did I talk about all of these different forms of writing that I dabble in? Because after all, we are here today to talk about poetry, right? But then poetry is not that discrete. It is not a foreign entity that means one thing. There are various forms of writing that inevitably flow into one another. Like my friend Shohini is going to read something today. She said that my work, which I'm going to read today, is a prose poem. So will that be a good fit for the session? Why not? Because it will actually highlight the way the different forms of writing flow into each other. And there is never one specific kind of poetry that you write, because if there were, there would be no progress, and we would not have our free verse, we would not have the different visual poetry forms that we have, we wouldn't have the other different kinds of poetry that we have, like the various structures, various meters which poets from our generation have invented. We might still be writing in the Shakespearean meter, which is all good, because I do write in the Shakespearean meter sometimes and I love it. But there is also the concept of progress. And so I have been conducting these workshops and seminars at various institutions like NIT Rourkela, Caltech Medical College and ISER and all, where I've always titled my sessions as finding your way up the atlas of poetry, trekking your way up the atlas of poetry, because I've always visualized the concept of poetry to be as changing as the earth that we live in, right? In a constant state of creation and destruction, constantly breaking, and if we look back now, there was once the Pangea, right? And then now, if we look back, poetry has come across so many different changes and so many different ways that it has been not destroyed, of course, but built different ways. Like the skyline of poetry has changed, if you can like this metaphor. Then of course, because performance poetry has come up, there has been different ways, different forms of art are collaborating with each other, like poetry and music. We often see different videos all across Facebook where poets are reading their work and there's someone playing a guitar along with them, or and it is also common in even Hindi films, where Javed Akhtar's lyrics are used all the time, and there's a beautiful music that is being played in the background. And then poetry is collaborating with dance. There is this group in Chandigarh called Sare Rahe Guzar who take poetry to the streets. And we all know about street plays. So the poets, they gather around the street and anybody can watch. And as a poet is reading their work, there is someone doing Bharatanatyam in tune to your poem, containing the meaning of your poem. And it is a collaboration. It is a seamless collaboration. And the two art forms, poetry and dance, which are seemingly different because one is introspective and the other is completely based on action, they won't seem different. And this is what I believe progress has done. for poetry. And why I'm talking about this so much is because today's session is completely interactive. We'll be posing different issues, and you can talk about the certain things that I talked about. And the people who will be coming up to read today, they can say what drove them to write that poem, what inspired them to, if there are certain issues that they want to say, because poets and writers, they are the mouthpieces of our generation. They see certain things, they say certain things which other people are afraid to say. So I would like, of course, one more thing, poetry slamming. I also wrote this recent column about poetry slamming culture in Kolkata, where I started by saying that we have all, how many of you follow button poetry on YouTube? Most of you. So I personally have been exposed to the culture of poetry slamming in the US because of button poetry. I've seen Phil K, Sarah K, Anis Mojgani's poems through button poetry. And they were doing that before I was doing that. So when I wrote that column, and I was supposed to write about poetry slamming in Calcutta, I started with saying that after attending, I have hosted a bunch of these events across the city, and what I've seen is people have been coming up to the stage and reading their poems in Bangla, Hindi, Urdu, Farsi, Marathi, whichever language, because Kolkata is a culmination of cultures, so people have been expressing themselves in the vernacular, and that is how we can see progress. That is, we people are making the art form our own, and this is how poetry will always survive, because it is not a foreign entity that we can only study in a class where we can mark out the metaphors. That is a wonderful thing. I love attending poetry lectures and English literature classes. I loved them when I was in Calcutta Girls, and I still love them. But that is not the only thing. It is within us. Even some poets even argue that even existing is poetry. And so on that note, I would like to start the session with the other poets. But before that, if you allow me, I'd read something of my own. This is from a book called The Tenant of the World. A Tenant of the World. And like I said, I write a lot about travel. So this poem takes place inside an airplane. It is called The Translation of Time. Suddenly, while on a sleepy airplane journey, when silence stands like summer in the company of pattering droplets of hurried feet, somewhere a cassette starts playing. The dust from its plastic case drenching the clouds like tired makeup on a cotton ball. Playing an old song from a time when you were too immature yet too impatient to choose a favorite. A song you don't need to explain. The fact that you are who you are for 21 years being explanation enough. You realize he who has been playing the song is a little embarrassed of how loud it came on at first, and is adjusting his headphones as you succumb to the dusk streaming in outside. As at 40,000 feet above the world, journeys start to mean something else to you. You realize it isn't having an old favorite song be someone else's favorite that you can translate time. The way mountains age out of their winters with every footprint on their receding snow. You realize it isn't having parts of yourself rain into the earthen cup souls of others that you can measure the length, the strength of your age. Thank you. And I would like to end this long speech of mine by saying that I get my, madness for travel from my father, who is in the audience with us, and of course from my mother, who comes along with, who's always ready to pack up and go along with us mad souls. So thank you for existing. And okay, so the first, the people who signed up to read, are you all here? Can I see a show of hands? So Divyangi, will you go first? Hello.
Yeah, so I'm Divyangi Shaha. I'm presently in St. Xavier's College studying English literature. I'm in my third year. So I started writing poetry when I was in school, and I used it almost in a therapeutic way as an outlet for all my pent-up frustrations. And later I found out that I discovered a part of myself that I hadn't known through poetry. and I think I've been writing poetry for the last 3 or 4 years now, and I've bloomed as an individual in the process. So the poem that I've chosen to read today, it's called Girl in the Bookstore, and I've specifically chosen this because of where we are. So I'll read the poem first and then talk about it. I saw her on a Thursday night. With Elvis playing, the mood was right for a drink and a conversation on almost anything under the sun. As a budding poet at 21, I could have proposed something fun, but instead I let my imagination take flight. Of all the shiny hardbound books I could have bought or taken a look, I chose to read her soft pawed strides. Down the shaded boulevards, lined by words of ancient bards, I wondered who built towers in her mind. I took note of the careful hand that turning pages quietly scanned through madness for some semblance of sense. I do not know what is the sound of the chosen words that she had found that gently punctuated her silence. In spaces between words she wept, in parentheses her love she kept, written down but never to be read. I dog-ear every verse she'd cite, journeying through the black and white, although what I saw in her was mostly grey. In this encounter in my head, I know there was lots to be said, but I never really got to hear her speak, as if I had entered a room with no lights and a person whom one couldn't hear, but only hear breathe. She kept all her books closely pressed against the hollows of her chest, till her arms couldn't contain more poetry. And her many friends from borrowed lives, who unlike her would never dive, to uncover the name of her story. Thank you. So, the inspiration behind my poem is something I believe every storyteller has done at some point in her or his life. So I find myself in public places very often, and what I do is I look at people around me and I imagine their backstories, and I do that just for fun. So I see someone sitting with a book or a cup of coffee, and I think about where this person can go after 2 hours and who he or she will meet, and I amuse myself just thinking about that. So, and I specifically tend to do this in bookstores, and I judge people a lot by what they pick up to read. So, but then I didn't want to make the focus of the poem about the person and what she's reading and how judgmental I am. But what I want to show is how poets can be more perceptive than other people. So I sensed that this person could be me or anyone, maybe having a bad day and finding solace in a bookstore such as this. And it amuses me to think that the people around me have no idea who I am, and I can be anyone over here, and they have no idea the kind of life I've led. And this is me stepping into the shoe of someone else, the observer, and trying to imagine what might be going on in the mind of the person, right? And as a poet, I think I can sense that there is more depth to what meets the eye, and I can't point out what exactly one person is going through, but writing poetry has made me more sensitive, and that is something I'm very glad that I have been able to develop within myself, because I've realized that I understand emotions better. And even though, even in this poem, I haven't been able to point out what exactly I saw in the person I've written about, but I think I've been able to sense something more than others, and that is what I feel makes me stand out as a poet.
Hi, so my name is Srushoti Mukherjee, and I am a sporadic poet. I am not as frequent as any of the people who've read here. However, I am a very passionate writer of poetry, and I started writing at a very young age. So until recently, that's something that I really struggled with, was considering myself to be a true poet, right? So for a long time, especially people who share their poetry via social media, you will get told, or you will have somebody at some point doubting your ability as a poet because of the way in which you choose to share it, because if you choose to write it on maybe your notes app on your phone rather than a typewriter. And all of this, while I was dealing with all of these issues of being a new poet, I also I had something very traumatic happen in my personal life, which was that my dad passed away, right? And the horrible side effect of this tragedy was that I thought, okay, so now I have something real to write poetry about. Because so much of poetry, especially when it's by young women, it just gets dismissed as like angst, or as, oh, she she doesn't have anything to say, or oh, it's not important enough, right? So in my poetry over the last year, I've been dealing with both of these sides. I've been dealing with the guilt of knowing that I use something so horrible for my art, and yet at the same time feeling like it gives validation to the fact that I practice this art, right? So I'm going to read out a couple of poems. The first one is called Aleppo. And Aleppo was something that I wrote about my dad. When he was we knew that he was going to pass away. There was nothing more that he could do. He was in hospice care, right? And it was also, ironically, the first ever poem of mine that ever got published in a literary magazine. So I was sitting here thinking, my dad didn't get to see this. I wrote this about him, but it got published once he was gone. So I don't know if, maybe it's a little too heavy for a poetry session, but since it's my first ever poetry reading as well, so I thought I'd pay tribute to him with this. So the reason it's called Aleppo is because if you guys know about the city in Syria, it was one of the worst hit in the refugee crisis. It was destroyed by the bombs. And this was happening while my dad was dying. So I kept thinking about these different kinds of deaths and about how in that great sort of tragedy on a global level, so many people knew about it. We still didn't know the names of the individuals who were dying in that crisis. And over here, another individual was dying and we still don't know his name. So nobody apart from me really cared that he was gone, right? So it's about that. Grief. In weeks, nothing has moved me. I chase something and fail. The screen dries my eyes. No rivers flow in Aleppo. There are no streams, only rubble. Only dead children litter the street. A leaf falls outside my window. A bomb falls in Aleppo. My father coughs up blood. Soon he will die, withering, curling like an Aleppo dry flower. The bombs rain in Aleppo. People cry. A dry shower wets my hand. The light wets the dying eyes my father wears on his head. My father cannot rise. My mother kneels. She feeds him. Water. The people of Aleppo cry for water. They beg. Dust is stuffed down their throat. Death marches into Aleppo and into my home. My mother sits beside the sinking light, asleep, awake. I stand. The birds twitter and fall. Bombs fall in Aleppo. Silent in the night that Aleppo burns. The night floats on the holy blue. The holy way towers into the holy sky. The holy bell blares midnight to the statue with the arm, and the statue with the face, and the statue with the bizarre smile, and the statue with nothing at all but holes. The world is filled with holes. The world gapes. The world is burning. The world needs to be knitted. My house is on fire. The fields are on fire. I run out to face the stars that shine on Aleppo. The plaster crumbles from the walls. No one arrives and screams, "Look, Aleppo burns too." There is nothing to knit me to the oceans of Aleppo. My ocean of grief cannot be contained by sheets dry as Aleppo's winds. The sun rises and falls daily outside the window. The sky cleaves in half and poets cry in puddles on the bedroom floor. My mother withers as Aleppo falls. I am silent. I cannot sing. There are no words in me. I am dying. I am dying choking on grenade crusts. I freeze and fall into the grey spiral streets, a labyrinth under the skin, bursting with the birth of 1,000 worlds, bloated with the light of the moon. The moon blazes in the sky. I clutch the ancient brick walls that weep, the ancient brick walls that trembled with birth. My mouth gapes in a scream. A man in Aleppo screams. How does one write, mother? How does one sing, father? Father, can you help me? Can you make me speak before you're gone? Father, can you hear me? Mother, are you there? Or should I bid my final goodbye like the flowers of Aleppo do? Yeah. I didn't know if it would be appropriate for the reading, but it's the only thing I could think of to read. And tying in with this, the second poem that I would like to read is completely different, right? So this was written at the same time actually, and it was also something that was against the background of violent political turmoil, right? So this is called Me, and this is about me discovering myself as a woman while there were these, I don't know if you remember, but there were these sort of violent riots Padmavat. There were so many sort of burnings and strikes and loots all over the country. So I was reading about that, and at the same time, I remember looking at myself in the mirror for the first time in about, 20 years. And as you will notice when you look at me, I am not a small person, right? And as people who are not small, especially as, again, girls who are not small, I think we're often told to take up less space, and we are told to reduce ourselves, and we're told to become smaller. And I remember looking in the mirror and thinking, this is the night I choose not to be small. Because if there's something that can act as resistance, I think it will be us choosing to speak out and not giving in to these pressures, right? So this is called Woman. And this is how a rebellion begins, at midnight. The first stroke feels like the first touch of a lover's kiss. The coolness against the skin drags. No pain. Only a sense of cleansed, limpid bliss. The black slowly appears, white, naked, fresh. The darkness peeled apart, chop by chop, gently, lovingly. The pink is revealed, glistening, ruby red, hidden in the flesh. Like a bride in some Naidu song. Large eyes behind gazed curtains, half shy on some wedding day. Holy, translucent, inviting. The curls wash away with a damp cloth and soap, carefully, not to slice the paper thin. And it blooms. I am 9 years old, meeting myself in the mirror. For the first time, the folds that since they grew and bled, I had not dared to touch. I am a woman. I am born at last. And this is how a rebellion begins. In the depths of a wild night while cities burn, I gaze into the mirror, sitting, legs spread apart, timid, tender as a babe, and now a queen. Unclothed, unblemished, unflinching, beloved. Take 2 more minutes of your time. Did you guys realize what that poem was about? I mean, what? Balo? Yeah, closed. So she thinks it's about masturbation. It's not. Close enough. I can't hear you. Menstruation. That is correct. So it's about how we are often told to be ashamed of the fact that we bleed. And I think it's about time, especially after the Rupikor picture that went viral, if you guys know about it. I think it's about time that we stop being afraid of it. Thank you.
So I'm Anthony, and today I'm going to address a problem which is faced by many adolescents of their age, and that is the increasing distance between a parent and a child. So this is not a personal poem, it's just something that I just imagined someone would go through. So this is it. I'm slowly turning into that which I always feared. As a child, I could never understand his whimsical nature, his unrestrained emotions, his inexplicable behavior. I blocked him from my life, from my thoughts, and yet he haunts me in my memory. Every time I look at my wheatish skin, my long bones, my ice-cold eyes, I get reminded of the blood that courses through these veins. Every time I gaze into the mirror to line my eyes with kajal, I see the reflection of a stone-cold warrior, a face drawn long by weariness, yet her head is held high. I see my father in every movement of my body. I see his mocking smile, hear his incisive words spill out from my mouth, an action that I dreaded and I promised never to repeat. I'm surprised how this delicate body hits against the wall, storms the floor, locks the door with an aggression that I fear the most. And so, even though I've blocked him, he keeps oozing out from every bone of my body, stretching, flailing these arms to extents that I never imagined. I keep going back to books to find peace. And there, he haunts me again. Rummaging through my dusty library, I come across a book that was evidently his. His whispers of wisdom have crept through the leaky bricks of my subconscious. I touch the pages. I feel his touch. I see sentences passionately underlined, the same which I loved. I realize how much I missed him and how I can never go back. mostly because in the silent screams for help, in the deafening cries for peace, he has changed too. Today, he no longer resembles what I imagined him to be. In the back of my mind, a father of 2008 inspires me, leaves me notes of constructive criticism, shakes up my mind to sweep away the cobwebs of idyllic laziness. But in these 10 years, I lost my father. He physically remains, but his words no longer inspire thought. I see undesired love, overbearing love, tiring love result in a mound of flesh born out of dissatisfaction. This feeling percolates through every cell of my body, forcing me to search for love of my own and shattering me into 1,000 bits. Dissatisfaction seeps through me again. Numbness finds its way back into me. The mind jolts back to the days of being a curled up fetus, where a cord of haunted cows connects to a womb of discontent. And I realize that no matter how hard I try to block my father, fate will ensure that this unresolved connection should feel the way it should, comfortably numb. Thank you. Just a few words. This is, as I mentioned, not a personal poem, but it's the constant clash that we have, because if we find a father or a mother or any parent or any elder whom we actually don't like, but we actually feel that we have grown into that person, that is the most shocking thing, because as a child we've always promised ourselves that we will change and we will not let that person affect us in any way. But there are some things which you just can't control, and this is just one of them. And I knew it was a bit heavy for this poetry session, but it's one of the closest things I've ever written. So I just could not help myself from sharing this. Thank you.
And as you repeatedly kept saying that this may be too heavy a poem to share in the poetry session, but it's not. This is a safe space, and poetry or any of the creative arts is one of the safest spaces that you can think of, where you can be yourself and you can be a million other people depending on the narrative, if you're trying to emulate a character and so on. So I said this is going to be an interactive session, so if anybody wants to speak on that, please do. So the issue that I want to speak about is what they were talking about, that maybe sometimes when you're writing about something severely deep, it has a lot of different connotations, people say that you shouldn't write about that, because so what do you think poets should do? Because do you think a piece of art that is written for a very relevant issue, and if you're trying to get over that, if you're trying to give yourself some peace, does a work of art produced taking inspiration from that issue, does it bring you closer to the issue? Does it make it harder for you to escape? Or or is it more cathartic? Does that make you easier to escape that issue once you have expressed it on paper or any other way? So the mic is here. If anybody wants to talk about that, please do.
I always think that writing poetry is a form of liberation. It liberates me and it helps me. For me, poetry is a tryst for the truth. So in the process of writing for me is a process of learning the truth. So it helps me understand it better, and it is more liberating and in a way cathartic as well.
So whether it has a negative effect or a positive effect, whatever it is the truth. Be it negative, be it positive,
The negative or the positive.
Even if you write about the apparent issue, I would think that the end of the day it's the issue that we are depicting the real life incidents in our poetry. At the end of the day, the event just becomes a metaphor, and the poem becomes a higher form. It's elevated to a totally lower form. So it becomes a totally different thing which is carried on for generations. I guess that's what all art is about. So it's not just about the day-to-day happenings of the event, but what we learn as metaphor.
Exactly, that is what I feel, that if you think you're writing about somebody else, it was intentional, writing about her personal life was intentional, but even if it's unintentional, you inevitably put a little bit of yourself in it. You inevitably find the narrative of something outside what you're writing about shift into your life, shift into your being, right? And yes, so thank you for your responses. We would like to keep this series of responses going to make it a more interactive. I even have a lot of icebreakers prepared, but you didn't need that. You are all very responsive. So, Shoini, you present the next one.
Hello. I'm Shoini Basu and I'm a student of English Honours in St. Xavier's College. I'm in my third year right now. I started writing poetry when I was very young, but and this mic thing doesn't really work out for me because I hate speaking. Anyway, I will not let my nerves take over. So the thing is, I started writing poetry, but now I have reached a middle ground where I'm writing poetry as well as prose. It's a mix-up, but I like it that way. So the piece I'm going to perform today is called Postmortem, and I'll explain why I called it that. So here goes. From the far corner of my eye, I watched as life seeped out in slow drips, like the familiar smell from your old t-shirt that fast faded into the thin air. Your sudden absence spread a vacuum that pushed my back against the wall and left no room for me to breathe. I had to gasp, preyed on by claustrophobia. Like the outstretched, flailing hands of a compass, we lay far-flung in imprisoning arms of alien cities, unknowingly tethered at the fulcrum, somehow living, yet dead. The nauseating news of nostalgia creeps up from behind and fastens its knot around my neck, dragging me into a whirlpool of memories. My mind is muddy and my soul tire-scratched. The ebb and flow of emotions come back to haunt me. Old promises resound as words align themselves in orders that have been scrambled, offering to cajole me. The images come in bursts and they flicker away quickly too. A burning stench rushes up my nostrils as my eyes wander to the carcass of my dead hopes and my lost love, raging in flames, refusing to ashen into an untimely death. The futility reaches out to me and interlaces my fingers as I begin the routine postmortem. With hope-dimmed eyes and wavering hands, I flounder and scavenge for leftover traces of love, still alive in the skeletal remains of old habits, and hunt for refuge in what I once called my safe house. Dissecting every moment and pushing that scalpel into the fragments, hoping to learn the magic spell that held it together seamlessly in one fine, delicate tapestry of dreams. But as I delve deeper into every gash and every scar, a battlefield stares back at me. With every successful report that assures that all is dead, my hopes revolt. They rise up to crawl back to you and force that compass arm to bend back to being two parallel lines again, that keep hoping in vain to converge as one and spin once more, that magic yarn. Thank you. So this is called postmortem because I have tried to explore how distance gives a better perspective to relationships. I think so. Anyway, so proximity doesn't give that edge. I think distance helps you think something's better, I guess. So postmortem has tried to go into something where I try to explore a relationship which is in decay, and I try to go back over what went wrong. And so this is also me staying in denial over things going wrong. So every time the report, we are doing a postmortem on something which is dead already. So that's the irony also. So when we see that it's dead, I don't want to believe it's dead. So I go back and try to look for the magic, because the magic is the only missing element over here. So yeah, and that's the thing why I wrote postmortem. This was written for actually my department fest and characters on. So also the thing about poetry, why I write poetry, is that I have always been perpetually sad. I use that devotion to a lot of extent to write poetry. That's the common thing about poets. I think we're all very sad. At least I am. Anyway, so that apart, yeah, thank you. I'm very awkward at this.
Hi everybody, I'm Madhura and I'm a final student of Chartered Accountancy course, and I know that's very weird, but here's my poem. The title is Where Do You Lead? I begin. I said to the road, where do you lead? The road said, be a leader and find out. So hey, I'm out, loud and stout, playing another bout. On some days, I hide behind the phantom of opera mask, a mask of a theatre artist. A lot of people do pay to see me. I wonder if deep within they're here to find their way in. I wonder if they pay to buy happiness while I'm here to subtly settle the mess. On others, I'm a crazy accountant, lost in calculations, debiting what comes in, crediting what goes out, deciphering the marginal value of production, ascertaining your tax deduction, investment deduction under ATC. This isn't where I want to be. Loud and stout, I'm finding my niche out. On yet other days, I'm drawing like the world's my canvas, painting my world's darkness, filling the juncture of broken road with soft color tincture from my color board. Then on some days, my heart mutters. With a little flour and butter, I Google recipes for a starter. In an hour and a quarter, I do what it takes to bake one chocolate cake. And when I'm full and stout, I get going on my way out. On naughty days, I sleep on bookshelves so tall that require a library ladder lest I trip and fall and read them like it's my first language. Breaking free from the worldly bondage, they're my passions. My passions are not quotations, not thriving on expectations. Now, in this promising sunshine, on breaks of my daytime, I've learned that my life is like riding a bike, where to keep my balance, I have to keep moving. So what if I fall, finding destinations which might not be the ultimate of them all? A halt, a cessation, was only meant to prepare for the next stride. Far and strong, strong and loud, loud and stout, I'm finding myself out. These are just dreams, fleeting, ephemeral, pretty. But do they come true just because we dream them? That's exactly when I said to life, I do not want to know where you lead. Just follow me and run like you depend on me, because you do. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mehna Sareen. I am a third year medical student, which is a weird thing for a poet to be. But I have been writing since I was in school, and I usually I tend to speak up a lot in my at home about things that bothers my parents. Like, why are you talking about this thing? It's not appropriate dinner table conversation. And my mom often, asks me to keep quiet or not talk about this, or maybe we can talk about it later, but that never happens. So I ended up writing poetry about things that bother me, but things I'm not allowed to talk about. So I chose, my poem is called Wire Crime. It's about the crime that happens through wires, online, sort of like harassment. And I'm not allowed, or it's not encouraged to talk about that in family or in the family or, around cousins. But it needs to be spoken about. So I chose this because I got an opportunity to talk about it, and here it is. I am a ghost trapped in yellow-taped cyberspaces where a crime was once committed. They came looking for fingerprints, but found an IP address instead that belonged to a computer in a broken, dilapidated city on a different side of the world. It would be an international issue, but man, we can't afford to climb your molehill mountain now. There are way bigger kamikaze terror attack, melting ice caps, stupid precedent problems at hand. A wire criminal sits in his wire chair, hurling wire abuses at a flesh and bone woman till her self-respect bleeds. You say it's not real abuse if it's delivered through an evolved tin can phone. If she screams for help in ones and zeros. You seek refuge in deserted scaffolds of abandoned social media accounts of the half-dozen willowy woebegone women you thought you did right by doing them wrong. But you forget all the women that have screamed in isolation into the full moon night until their voices broke, and the she-wolves that have howled as they witnessed abuse. There is a certain violence in awareness. They smell despair in the blood that your words draw, precise and thick, bold, crimson red, Times New Roman size 14,
Just like the half-truth headlines that you'll scroll through while sipping your morning coffee. Because she will only scream in ones and zeros and "Where did he touch you, ma'am?" will always draw a blank. Because they told her that the bikini zones of her body are red light areas, but biology never mentioned the extent of her burning fluorescent zone, where he touched her before she could even say no. The World Wide Web is your oyster, right? There is nobody in the wires to testify your crime. Except for the ghost trapped in the cyberspace attic. I'm the one who sees it all on my feed, which is a deafening museum of #MeToos caught in the spider web. All the women running from hungry men who jumped into a safety net. Just like my friends, just like me. And one day, all the wrong wolves will howl your name in unison and bring the wire roof down with chronicles of your wire crimes. So the thing that inspired this last year was the beginning of the #MeToo movement, which resurfaced again. And it usually asks victims to talk about physical abuse, but nobody pays attention to the abuse that happens online. And when you try to talk about it, you're asked to go off Facebook, but then what we don't realize that it's not the social media platform that's in fault. It's the people using the platform, or rather misusing it. And we often don't realize that. And we tell young children not to be on Facebook instead of teaching them a correct way of using Facebook. And it's something that happens to a lot of people, men, women, anybody who tries to speak up about something they believe in. And it's so normalized that we just know that it happens and nobody talks about it. And it sort of defeats the purpose of social media, I feel. Like, it's supposed to be a safe platform. And it so happened that a couple of times in the recent past, I had reported people being abusing or bullying people in the Facebook comment section, but Facebook has told me that this post is not against our community guidelines, but we have looked into it. So what are the community guidelines? A question arises that who makes these guidelines and why are they so lax? And so I deleted my own comments which were spoken against, and I thought it wasn't a big deal. And I've been called some distasteful things without preamble, I feel like I didn't deserve them, nobody does. But I've been called things. And after it happens a few times, you start getting scared of simple hellos. I mean, that's not a normal way to live psychology. So I feel like instead of discouraging Facebook and Instagram, we should, regulate ourselves more. Better. I think that's it.
Went through that, so did I, so did a lot of other people. And when you said that was normalized, it's the way other people see it, people who may have not faced it or have faced it but have chosen to block it out of their memory and such. And what you said about how uninstalling Facebook is not the solution, because that would mean that you're asking the victim to behave a certain way instead of asking the person who's actually done the thing to better themselves. So thank you for sharing that. And of course, this segment of the 3 poets that we had, the first one was titled Postmortem, and we ended it with a doctor's one. So poetic justice, I'm just saying. And then she spoke about social media, and another one icebreaker that I'd like to highlight here is because you're all writers, you have always maybe most of you have been trying to put yourself out there, make more people read your work through social media. How many of you use social media to post your poetry or other writing pieces on? And my first question is, do you think it is safe? Because I used to do that also, and one of the advantages was the fact that I met a lot of good people and I connected to readers who helped the sale of my book thanks to Facebook, because I put the online link, the purchase links over there, and that's how people could access it. That was the advantage. But then this is something that happened to me after the launch of my book. I was friends with someone from my school. I'm not taking any names, and if I do take a name, people going to Calcutta Girls will definitely recognize her. But what happened was she announced that she is launching her own book. She used a verse from my poem in her caption, and I mean it did not happen by accident. It's not like she, created the same sequence of words because all minds think alike, all poetic minds think alike. I don't buy that. She used my verses and then at the end she announced that people, I'm launching my first book of poetry, and it'll be it's celebrated at so and so place. It'll be available at so and so dates. So this is what happened, and. So that's my question. Do you think it is safe, or do you think it is bittersweet, black and white, and somewhere in the middle?
I think that it is bittersweet because a similar experience, similar situation, where I actually contributed a few of my poems, and then I was told that they are not mine because I've already shared them with someone. So I think that is somewhat justified, because once you put something on the internet, it's no longer yours. Like, you give everyone complete right over that property. But again, as a poet or as anyone who creates, rather, even like art, like painting or drawings or anything like that, it's absolutely inappropriate to use something without someone's consent. And yes, I think it is a very bittersweet experience. Of course, marketing, like Facebook is known for its marketing, Instagram and stuff. So those platforms are very advantageous in those situations. But after you've established yourself as a writer or a poet or something, as a creator, and then you use it as a platform, I think it's a much more better way to use these Facebook and all such social media accounts.
Okay, so to add one book or afraid to get a copyright or asking am I good enough, and it's something you always feel, it never stops. But I would encourage people to go ahead, get your copyright, get it published by a certain publisher, be it small, be it big, because your publisher is never constant, it keeps changing. Get it published in a magazine or any place, so that if somebody plagiarizes your work, you can sue them. Does anybody have anything to add about social media? Okay, so something I've noticed is, and this is a grievance, and because I said this is a safe space, I can talk about it, and I'm not jealous when I'm saying this, and it's a fact, something I've noticed, that when social media has a certain mood. I mean, the number of reactions you get on a certain kind of post varies from the types of posts. Like if somebody says, I'm getting married in 5 days, your post will explode, right? And then when you perhaps you write a poem that you've contemplated on, that has a lot of beautiful metaphors loaded in it, do you think it gets the same amount of exposure? Or at the same time, the different Bollywood or pop culture references that people make, and there are various articles in well-known magazines where they write poems about certain characters from Bollywood movies, or about pop culture references, and about certain movements which they don't really know much about, but they just write a couple of lines based on it, which are easier to understand than what you're writing. Maybe you're putting in a metaphor, maybe you're writing something which makes people think, but people don't want to think because they have attention deficit disorder, which I think we're all slowly developing because of social media. So what do you think happens? This is a fact, right? That our writing doesn't get the amount of attention that other kind of posts get. So do you want to say something about it?
That it wants to connect with. So like when I write about K-pop and my first 2 lines are explicitly stating that it's about K-pop, people will like about it or read more about it. But when I'm writing about a poem that does not relate to the masses, but I know out of 500 friends on Facebook, there's one who's going through that, who will read that. So I think my art will be beneficial in that way, because she'll be able to relate to it, she'll find a solution to her problem. She'll find a ear to her voice, a shoulder to her head. So I think art connects with whomever it wants to connect with. So
Quality over quantity, right?
Quality
Always.
over quantity.
And have you noticed that when people want attention on their Facebook post, they highlight it with something that has nothing to do with the post? I'm not saying the word here. My parents are here, so certain thing that starts with S and and yeah, ends with what you know, and it ends with, and then the post has nothing to do with it, but it catches people's attention, and they'll read through the post trying to locate where that those graphic scenes are going to be in that paragraph. So yeah, people had something to say.
I think it also relates to how social media is used. It's the behavior, like how we use it. Like you get a few minutes off work, and like you decide to just quickly check your social media. And if you notice, if you observe how people are scrolling quickly, just one after the other, just moving up, liking it, then moving on, commenting maybe, then moving on. So it's a very rapid, fast-paced environment, and you have to tailor your poetry or writing to that kind of social media environment. And I think also that visual always helps. I try, at least when I try to write for social media, I try to put it with a picture or some kind of graphic, something that can grab their attention and keep it. But I accept that I also always be moving up and down. So it's that's what it is. And that's why I think like flash fiction or flash poetry is so useful for that kind of a hyper-fast environment. And I don't know, it's just the nature of the medium. And if I want to read a long poem or like any prose, I kind of move off social media.
That's true, and that is what I think is why sessions like these are necessary, where we can only talk about what we're going to talk about, and it doesn't, like our minds, it doesn't branch out in other ways. My father,
You are talking about this.
he's not, by the way, he writes beautiful poetry in Bangla.
When you are talking about this art and social media, I just want to impress upon one fact. If you think there is no Facebook, no WhatsApp, no social media, a photographer like me would be even of oblivion. So whenever I am sharing my photographs in social media and getting hundreds of likes, I can also get a good snap. Once one of my friends downloaded one of my photographs and put it as its cover photo. So I thought, okay, I'm that much a photographer that somebody can steal my photograph. So that is a different thing. And we are all here, the youngsters are all here, I think, only because of this social media. You are connected more on the social media. You think there is no Facebook? Ekhane keu asto ki? Over telephone or anything? No. Number one. And number two, you are talking about plagiarism through social media. I can tell you a story. This is not a story, this is a real thing. This is reverse plagiarism. Sunil Gangotay was the editor of Desh Kobita. Talking about Sunil Gangotay, I prefer talking in Bengali. Why bojo? Sunil Gangotay তখন দেশের কবিতা সম্পাদক। ওনার কাছে প্রচুর কবিতা রেগুলার জমা পড়ে, অনেকে কবিতা পাঠায়। উনি সেখান থেকে বেছে বুঝে কবিতা ছাপতে ঠিক করেন, কোনটা ছাপা হয়। একবার ওনার কাছে একটি কবিতা এসেছে, কবিতাটি এতই জঘন্য, কিন্তু ওনার একটা মায়া হয়েছে সেই কবির প্রতি, যে এটা আমাকে ছাপতে হবে। কারণ তার আগে সে প্রচুরটা কবিতা পাঠিয়েছে, সেম কবিতা। So he started collecting those lines. And শেষে ব্যাপারটা এমন হলো, বাসায় যখন আমরা শুনি যেটা তো আপনারই কবিতা হয়ে গেল, আপনি ছাপুন, আপনার নাম দিয়ে ছাপুন। The greatness of great people is like that. সেই কবিতাটা ছাপানো হয়েছিল কিন্তু সেই কবির নাম। So this is reverse plagiarism. যদি ফেসবুকে তোমার একটা কবিতা কেউ ডাউনলোড করলো, কি নিজের বলে প্রচার করে দিল, if you are popular enough, some fans or something like that will react. This is a kobita. This is main as this kobita. Tumi keno korcho? So you have to build up your image like this. Don't be afraid of plagiarism. You are here, a middle-aged or old man is here with this digital SLR clicking photographs. My only intention is to post in Facebook.
I hope a lot of we all need to be grateful to my dad for that. Thank you, and thank you for sharing your opinions. Did anybody else have anything to say? Psychological turmoil that maybe I should make my words simpler so that more people can like it, or by liking it I mean clicking like on it, and tell me I'm not the only one, right? Yeah, so thank you for that. So thank you for sharing your responses and making it a beautiful interaction. So who wants to read next?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Gloria, and I'm currently pursuing political science honors, and I'm a third-year student of Loreto College. And I started discovering that I am a poet in 2017, and this thing had the element which had led to this was when my mother fell into depression. And two pieces I'm going to read, and both of them are kind of philosophical. First one is known as Her Sob, and it is totally related to my mom, because my mom had gone through the disastrous phase of depression, and I think most of you know how destructible it is, depression. So every line of this poem relates to her feeling, like what is depression, and every line is like her feeling. She didn't speak up, but I could feel her. And one fact which I have to mention is that my hands are shivering. I'm a very bad speaker, but then I'll straight go to my poem. Her Sob. As burden she was treated, with abhorrence she was greeted. Dreams eloped from her mind, exuberance she couldn't find. Smiles got abrogated and grind. Her lively soul got lost in the wind. Tears did not acquire place, for her tedious eyes didn't provide space. She was prevailing as dead. The life she bore with was her deathbed. Her inner marvel was gone. Instead of light, in her life, darkness shone. She was soulfully paralyzed. In darkness, her selfhood died undisguised. She pined for the ultimate destination, shunning her longevity and procrastination. She desired rapid physical death. She desired to expunge her last breath. She thought her innate sob after demise should never be heard. All of her significance for eternity shall be blurred. This is, thank you, this is the first one, and the second piece which I want to read, it is totally philosophical, and this is the poem which I first started writing. The title is Oft Do I Brood. It's like, it is the very humanic nature of being philosophical. Every human at certain point of time becomes philosophical, and to me this thought arrived that after physical death, what is the significance of human beings on earth? I know it is becoming very heavy, but then I would like to share this poem of mine. Oft do I brood. Oft do I brood. I believe I should. As to who am I? I stare up at the broad sky. I refrain from engaging into fairy tales, and forever with my success soar and fly. In requirement of getting acquainted with my mission, I'd love to have a vision which could come from above, portraying how wonderful is God's love. In the menacing exquisiteness of doom, the bliss turns out to be the cropper of gloom. But still, after receiving much of life, I ask to myself, who am I? Does everything ends when I die? Does all the relevance wash away? Or even after doom, it stays through night and day? My mind finally answered me. I am a thought, a beautiful thought, which never ever goes, even after doom. It is a flower which rejuvenates all former glooms and relives eternally, not bodily, but even after death, I prevail spiritually. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Rajitesh Banerjee. So I'd like to start by asking, how many of you have watched Madhura Banerjee? Yes. So for all those who haven't seen it, it's basically this interactive movie / game where you have to choose your own. It has got multiple endings, and you get to choose your own. Choose your own endings. Life is a gift, and as a student of medicine, I have realized it so much. Like, I've been to the emergency wards and I've been to the burn wards, and it's horrible, trust me. The first time I entered the burns ward, and the first thing I heard was a woman screaming. The woman screaming. Just think about this. One moment you're enjoying the music in your car, and the next moment something happens and you're lying down, sprawled on the ground, and you're just rushing to the hospital, and you lose your consciousness, never to return again. Please, life is a gift. Please do not take it for granted. Now, see, suicide. Many people tell us that suicide is a bit cowardly thing. For once, I disagree. Ending your own life is probably the bravest thing you could do. I mean, life is the greatest thing you had in your hands, and you are willingly choosing to end it. There must be a reason, a solid reason why you're doing it. You just don't give up like that. None of us gives up just like that, right? We experience a lot in life, good, bad, up, down, nice, ugly, but we just don't give up. So this poem is about suicides, about metro suicides. It goes like this. I live in a metro station. I have nowhere else to go. I watch as the first rays of the orange beam through the shutters of the gates, streaking across the darkest night as if a paintbrush with yellow had splashed through it on an inky blue bullet. I watch the guard mumble his prayer as he kisses the padlock and then pushes up the shutters, thus inaugurating the commencement of a new day. I watch the sweepers, ever punctual, sweep the stairs and the station clean, all in hopes of the few rupees after the job is done. They thankfully earn and pocket their earnings, and then they go away. But I do not have anywhere else to go. The ticket counters open, the sleepy, grumpy ticket issuers take their seats. Slowly people trick in. 1, 2, 5, 9, followed by multitudes. Gradually paces quicken as humanity starts racing time. But I do not have anywhere else to go. It's 9:20 a.m. I watch my father hurry down the stairs with the aim of catching the metro at 9:22. It never left him, that lost, ghostly look in his eyes. I miss my father. I miss my father. I miss my mother. I miss my sister. I wonder what Ma would be doing right now. Probably doing the dishes, I suppose. Sister would be in school. I'm not the only one who misses my family. They all do. They come out to watch them. Whoever travels this way and stare at them silently with longing and sadness, and then they look at me and our eyes reflect mirror images of the silent myriad of emotions, the churn on nothingness. The screeching of the trains to a horn, the anxious crowd of people in front of the closed doors, the whooshing sound of the doors as they open and close, the driver peeping out from the back coach, the faces of the late arrivals contorting in disappointment as the train leaves just as they run into the platform. I used to observe this all so much, but everything seems so mundane now. We retreat into the shadows after watching our loved ones. We do not speak, but we all know how each and every one of us ended up in here. Once I saw a man trying to join us, but he was saved. For some reason, I found it quite amusing. Being saved from inevitability just doesn't quite save you, sir. You might not go towards it, but it shall definitely come for you. Time passes. I don't. I guess even time loses its significance after a certain point. It's evening. I don't see father. He's probably taking the bus ride home. As the crowds thin and the station becomes more and more empty, I roam around harvesting and ruminating thoughts of wishes and could have beens and desires left unfulfilled forever. It's 10:40. The guard brings down the shutters and I look through them, viewing the silent, peaceful world outside. You know, I don't really miss being me, for one who had been pushed to the brink of self-loathing and depression. For once, I welcomed this change. Caught in the undertow was kind of my state of mind. But I couldn't bear it anymore. I was existing, alive and dead in this twisted world. Do you think that I chose this as my home? Yes I did. But it was destiny who brought me here, and I gladly took his hand as he led me to where I belonged. As I said before, suicide is one of the bravest things man can do. But it's so irreversibly tragic. 1 second you were doing it, and the next second you were gone. You're just gone. There's no record of you. There's no memory of you left as to why you're doing it. People will start assuming things, but maybe it doesn't matter, but just think about it, and think about how it will affect all your loved ones. You go out, you leave your home early in the morning and you just never come back. Your mom waits for you. So what's the point? What's the point of giving up that way? That it affects you irreversibly, sends you to a point of no return, and affects the family members, your loved ones, do something horrible. With this, I end my sayings of the day. Thank you.
I am Madhura Mitra, and I am a class 11 humanities student at Modern High School for Girls. So this is my first ever public poetry performance. So I'm really very nervous about this. I guess the reason I started writing poetry at all is because I was never comfortable with speaking out a lot. And so I started writing this, I started taking to this form of medium to express myself in ways that I could never well speak. So the poem I'm going to read today, it's called Blue Neighborhood. It was written during a recent school trip to Gujarat. And I guess the poem is a celebration of how we can find poetry in the most trivial things. Blue Neighborhood. I'm moving like so many others. Cold, hard treacle flowing down the streets. Pinpricks of blotted lights and unmannerly splotches of tinted colors. Hushes spiraling to a blabbering crescendo, and I'm silent. Comings and goings and popcorn stalls at the side. Traffic on the lanes and the by-lanes are where I try to lose myself. There are so many. The bus is moving. When I turn in my seat, there is a quivering sea of happiness, and beside me, the window is pushed up. Cold evening wind in my eyes, dark masses rush past. The city settles down to the inevitability of the night. Lights widen to streets.
and the highway dust swirled in a kaleidoscopic vision. A sudden jazz of light and colors, heightened senses shivered in an ecstasy of anonymous emotions. There's the plush red of the seats, the hardwood brown of the piano, clink of cutlery on glass tops, the reassuring finality of the hotel room and lights out. The hum of a housefly against cold hardness. Heaviness drapes us like the flamboyant hotel curtains, soft fabric against our skin, frail glass on our backs. Down there, streetlights pool at the empty street corners, darkness and sudden patches of bright. The walls are unmoving, and beyond is a lonely street. Flickering memories in an unknown hotel room, rare fragments of a buzzing city night. Now the dark is deepening. Light from the bathroom window is throwing long shadows on the wooden floor. Against the glass, we are silhouettes, and beyond us is the expansive night. There are no limbs, no words, no faces. We are human outlines against the stretching skies, hushes of unnamed sounds. City slumbers are deepening, dreams fall into being. We are waiting. The night grows old. Constellations are growing close in the night skies. Somewhere along the lines, we have left behind our dreams and losses. We try to spot the pole star. The highway winds around the city and into the far darkness. Along the line, cars are moving in a slow waltz. Here, we hear no sounds. At midnight, vehicles slide along the silk-smooth moonlit paths, an unbroken silence. In the night, the houses huddle together from the cold. Tall pillars stoop down to meet the flat tops. Up in the sky, there is a blue moon. It washes over the huddle of cement, brick and mortar. The blue neighborhood is born. Moonlight sonata plays in the dark. We are three, and here, each of us as lonely as Beethoven's splendid isolation. We don't speak. We are beyond time. Thank you.
A very good afternoon to everyone. I'm a second year law student, but that doesn't matter because today I'm a poet. I started writing poetry when I was in school, sometime around in class 10th. Yeah. So this, I have always been in the habit of romanticizing almost everything, which is sometimes not very helpful or practical. And today's poem is, I could tell you what this poem is about, but I would rather not, because I think that poetry is about discovery, not just for the poet, but for the reader. And I remember whenever I used to read a poem in school or any story in school, I would feel something. We all felt an emotion while reading Wordsworth or Blake or Shelley. But how do we know that that is the exact emotion that the poet felt? But that doesn't matter because, well, he's dead and you couldn't go back and ask him. But it matters because it changes you. It changes you even though you are just a reader, even though you are not the creator of it. You are learning from it. You are discovering yourself through it. So I would rather not disclose the meaning of this poem. And I could tell you the source of it, but I couldn't tell you the destiny of it. I will tell you the source of it. It was inspired, it was actually clicked into inspiration by a quote by Rumi, but its ultimate destination depends on each one of you individually. The words of Rumi that inspired me were, I will be waiting here for your silence to break, for your soul to shake, for your love to wake. Now I'll read my piece. It's very short. Every marker in the sand that binds, the chains that leave these trails behind, they lead me to that land far and wide, where love is a perfect monologue when he speaks. And everything in this world shall fade, as trees in autumn lose their shade, as roses do their petals lose, and lives are shortened by the nose. So shall we part from you too, and wake to find that his love is true. Then let these chains that trail behind be lost, and let me find that land far and wide where love is a perfect monologue when he speaks. Thank you. Four of you for sharing your poems with us. And what she very eloquently said, and I agree with, is the fact that, and she said it very beautifully in the way that the poet is the source, because the destination is each of you who carry the poem into immortality. And that is what I feel is the life cycle of a poem, that you are the creator, not just a poem, any written work, that you are the creator, and then when we talk about life cycles, we eventually come to a point where it stops, right? But a poem, a story, a book, it never loses, runs out of its course, runs down its course. It is immortal, and after you create it, more or less your job is done. I mean, there will always be that little voice in your head, as long as you're alive, saying you could have done this better, you could have, created it in a different way. Other than that, your job is more or less done, and then the poem lives with whoever reads it and the people who read it after you're dead, after generations to come, and so it is immortal. So that is what I really agreed with, and thanks for bringing it up so that I could speak about it. And right, so that was all of the people who wanted to read today. Thank you so much for reading your work and sharing your thoughts and experiences, each of which you have put so beautifully and so powerfully. And right, like I said, for this session, we are almost at the end of it. I think we can be here for another 20-25 minutes. Right, so for this session, to take it further, if there is a lull in the conversation sometime, just to be sure, I had prepared some icebreakers where I had put up this question tag on my Instagram story, and I'm an avid Instagram user, an addict, so to say. So yeah, so I had asked people to talk about certain things which they think happens only to them, and that is why I said that is once we always feel that people who think too much about things or are too sensitive, or even people who don't, they think that certain things happen to them only, but this is something I've experienced, that once I've spoken out about them, I realize it happens to everyone. And that is why we are going to normalize, I thought this evening we could normalize the way people feel, which only the written word can do. That you connect to somebody's words and then you realize that they feel that too, because I do. And another thing was, I asked people to talk about the various myths they have about artists. People think that about themselves also. Like, suppose you're sitting somewhere absent-minded and you've completely lost track of the world, and you think that maybe I'm doing that because I'm a writer, and that might as well be true. So the responses that I received more or less were repetitive, but they more or less said that writers are introverts, writers have anxiety, writers are absent-minded, and then the rest of them were permutations and combinations of the same. So I think rather than making it a generalization, we should celebrate how common it is. When Divyangi talked about how she imagines the lives of people, I thought that I remember that I used to do exactly the same thing when I was a child. I used to wake up early in the morning, much to the frustration of my parents, and I used to open the curtains, and it would be 4 o'clock in the morning, 5, and the people in my neighborhood would start to wake up. They would start, the first rickshaw would start to come, make its appearance on the street. The first shop would open its door, and the first, Machwala would spread his first, bounty on the road. And I would imagine this was the track, this was the childish track of thought that I had. Like, this man is with us now, but where was his father's father born? And at that time, what was he doing? Did he also have a child looking out of the windows? Was he also a fish seller? Was he also a machwala? The same way I used to think about other people's histories, and that is why history has always fascinated me. And And so that is what I wanted to talk about. Another thing which people, responded to in my Instagram story was, I face writer's block, and I think I'm the only one facing that, and nobody else goes through it as severely as I go through it. And you both would know that while going through the mentoring sessions on WhatsApp and my Captain website, people have often talked about the various types of writer's block that they go through and what they can do about it. And sometimes I thought I had all the answers because I was their mentor and they were looking to me for answers. But then I realized that I had doubts about the way I handled certain things which other people validated. They said that I feel this, and I said I never thought anybody else would feel that. So before we talk about writer's block, I'm sorry, can you hand over my book? Before we open the floor and talk about writer's block and your experiences and about absent-mindedness and stereotyping of writers and everything, I would like to read a poem that I wrote about writer's block. That was for one of the very first inter-college festivals that I attended at Presidency University. It was in celebration of William Shakespeare's life, so it was called Incarnadine, after what was said in Macbeth about the color red. And the fest was called Incarnadine, and we were asked to write sonnets in the iambic pentameter, in the Shakespearean sonnet form, like 3 verses, every other line would rhyme, and then we would have a rhyming couplet. So I wrote about writer's block because I was supposed to write a poem on spot that day, and I was scared. I thought I wouldn't be able to do it, and then I went ahead and I did it that day. And it was an ode to a feather, because in the Elizabethan times, as it has been depicted in every other place, that people wrote with quills, ink and quills. So I am talking to a feather, and I have written in more or less the Elizabethan language, Elizabethan format of English. And my point was that, look at me, I am frustrated, and I only want to put down a few words that make sense on paper, and that is the only thing I ask of you, my dear mind oozing through the ink. That is the only thing I ask of you, and that is the only thing you can expect from me. That is the highest level of dedication, because that is the only thing I ask. So this is what I wrote in Elizabethan English. Black plume of the mind, thou bloodied feather, perched upon the autumn appendages of a tree, a crack in the grey weather, cursed, haloed, the mirth of ancient sages. Wave thy winter not solely on mine eyes, decant thy dusk shades into my squalor. Weary be my summer of monsoon sighs, tread upon my heart canvas with valor. My mind is a swallow, tired of wings. Butterflies, wing broken, art worms no more. Restore swift the knowledge of why it sings, my infant soul of the jungles of yore. Speak, feather, of the sailboat lost at sea. Not less want I, all thou canst want of me. Thank you. And thank you. I really hope you liked it. And while I was talking about the experience of being an author, facing writer's block and everything, I can't help but reference this, a writer or a group of writers who have been writing this amazing TV series that I cannot detach myself from. This Is Us. How many of you have watched it or are watching it or following it? Only one? You're watching it, thank God. Those of you who aren't watching it, what are you doing? Okay, so I think when I talk about what I'm going to talk about, I might be giving a spoiler to 2 people in the audience, but I'm not going to do it. But in the latest episode, there's a character called Randall Pearson, whom I connect with, who's the character I connect most with. He says he has gone through a tremendous tumult in his life, and finally he's lying in bed and he's talking about his experience of going through things, and he all through the series, he has been shown as a very sensitive person, hypersensitive person who, like me, on the eve of every exam, breaks down, cries. So you can imagine being in college now, having graduated college now, I realized how silly I was being at the eve of every exam, crying and breaking down. But that is because I was overly sensitive, and I connect with Randall. And if I tell you how I connect with him, I'll be giving you spoilers, which I don't want to. Anyway, so he's saying that the things he has been going through, which have woven a beautiful narrative into the story. And then he says, I have gone through this, I have experienced that, I have been at a certain crossroads, which I didn't think was humanly possible for me to overcome, but I have overcome it. Then I've gone gone a certain distance, which I didn't think I had it in me, but then I did it. What was this superhuman instinct in me that made me do what I did? Is it really unique to me? Or is it just what it means to be a person? So my point is, when the people in my Instagram story kept sharing their responses, what I wanted to say was, what you're feeling isn't uncommon at all, because what you're feeling is completely common for all of us, writer or not. Sometimes maybe a little more for people who think too much, maybe it's more common for them. But at the same time, just because it's common doesn't make you any less unique. Because you are who you are, and you may be going through what everybody else is going through. And it's so, does that mean, I mean, people gathered in this room may have gone through the exact things in their 20s or in their teenage, because I think more or less we're all belong to the same generation. We may have gone through the same things, but once we are asked to write about a certain topic, as we have seen in certain creative writing competitions or so on, you give a single topic to a big audience, but the responses and the poems and the stories which come in response are all different. So we are all the same, but at the same time very different.